Bueno, siguen conmoviéndonos, ¿no? Vamos a ir hacia la última parte del trabajo del día de hoy, en donde tenemos un panel sobre la Revolución 4.0, la revolución de la inteligencia, y la cabeza de este panel es Peter High, que es presidente de MetaStrategy, una firma de asesoría de alto nivel que fundó en el 2001 para atender los requerimientos de información y hacerlos actuales a través de la tecnología. Ofrece asesoría e información a los directores de información de empresas rankeadas en el Fortune 500. Es experto en estrategias de negocios y tecnología de la información y ha desarrollado varias metodologías para actualizar los planes de elección y gestión de la cartera de proyectos para asegurar que alcancen niveles de clase mundial. Hayek escribe sobre innovación en la información y es colaborador habitual para medios como Forbes, Insight, The Wall Street Journal, entre muchos otros. Ha sido orador y moderador de conferencias en países como Estados Unidos, Canadá, Reino Unido, Irlanda, España, China, India y Australia. Le damos entonces la bienvenida a Peter High y al equipo que lo acompaña.
Gracias. Thank you very much. And thank you all. It's a great pleasure to be here. This is my fourth CITEK. I'm pleased to say that I've been to all of them, and what a wonderful experience this has been. It's been remarkable to see the growth that this conference has had. Thank you so much, Mrs. Marta, President Fox, for including me. So I want to speak today about the intelligent revolution that's happening. And I'd like to set some context. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give a brief presentation, and then I'm going to turn it over to three remarkable practitioners, people who are shaping the technology landscape. We've heard it from a number of wonderful speakers. We're now going to be hearing from people who are really driving a lot of the change within their operations at three very meaningful organizations. Let me introduce my three friends now. The first is Dave Smoley. Dave is the Chief Information Officer of Astra Zeneca. Great to have you, Dave.
Thank you.
The next one is Robbert Webb, the CITO, the Chief Information Technology Officer of Etihad Airways. Great to have you here. And last but not least, Lidia Fonseca, who is the CIO of Quest Diagnostics. Lidia, welcome. I would like to take care of a couple of things. First of all, I want to thank, as I don't speak Spanish, forgive me, I'd like to thank the translators who are going to be a great aid for us here on stage. I'd also like to thank Alba Stern, who has been of tremendous assistance to us, as well as Alejandra Jimenez and the rest of the team, so many people who are operating behind the scenes who make this the extraordinary event that it is. So thank you very much to all the people around. Thank you. Wonderful, and I should mention, with all the talk of NAFTA, we have gathered actually an American, a Canadian, and a Mexican here as well. So we have a little bit of some perspectives of practitioners from each of the relevant countries here. So, what does this whole Revolution 4.0 mean? How are things evolving from a technology perspective? Let me give a little bit of context. The whole notion of Revolution 4.0 or Industry 4.0 refers to the progression since the Industrial Revolution. So the first Industrial Revolution in the 18th century and 19th century, where our countries went from largely agrarian or farming communities to city dwellers, to much more business orientation and so forth, the beginnings of commerce, really. The second Industrial Revolution, 1870 into the period just before World War I, where we had the production of oil, the beginning of the mass production of autos, of the beginning of the airline industry, greater electricity and so on. Obviously tremendous change that has happened, and the increased urbanization that came with it as well. Fast forward a little bit further to the third industrial revolution, which is the digital revolution, one that we've been in for some time now. Obviously beginning with personal computing, continuing with the internet, and then on to the mobile revolution that has happened, and something that Tom Friedman, among many stimulating topics that he raised, one that he covered quite well. And now what we have, really beginning very recently, and one that will be going from now, is in fact this fourth industrial revolution, if you will. And this really is evolved around things like the Internet of Things, big data, robotics, artificial intelligence, increasingly autonomous vehicles, a variety of new technologies that will be used in really profound ways, and already are beginning to enter into not only the lexicon, but shaping the way in which business is done. We'll be hearing actually some examples of these kinds of trends through these practitioners who have joined me on stage. So I'll leave it to them to talk about some of the applications of these sorts of technologies into their own businesses, and we will all be enlightened in the process. Continuing though, I wanted to give, Tom Friedman also provided a nice context for the dramatic pace of change that has happened. And there are a variety of ways in which one can show that, whether it's the growth of companies, whether it is how quickly leaders of industries have fallen. One that I really like here is the years that it has taken to reach 50 million users for different types of technologies. So beginning with the automobile, 62 years, telephone, 50, I'll fast forward a few on these, credit cards, 28 years, television, 22, ATMs, 18, debit cards, 12. Now we fast forward into the third and now increasingly into the fourth industrial revolution with the internet, 7 years, PayPal, 5, YouTube, 4 years, Facebook, 3, Twitter, 2, and of course, Pokemon Go took 19 days for that to reach 50 million users. So really dramatic how fast an organization can spin up something of consequence and actually have a tremendous marketplace that is developed in the process. But it's important for us to recognize with all of this opportunity, there also are risks. And really, I think this is one of the profound existential questions that face industries today, is on the one hand, there is remarkable possibility when it comes to innovation, which is about risk-taking, let's remember. You're not innovating if you're not taking some risks. But at the same time, at the back of all this, we need to remember security, which is about risk mitigation, risk management. So these are opposite sides of the same kind of, the same operation that one must keep in the right balance, or else perhaps face some difficult consequences in the process. And so what we see is with the proliferation of devices, what has happened is there's this expanding surface area that unfortunately the bad actors have access to, which requires that we think differently, develop the right kinds of partnerships, and ensure that we are in fact mitigating risk even as we continue to take them through the course of innovation and the like. So I also wanted to mention and give a couple of examples here. I have a lot of conversations with technology innovators, whether chief information officers, CEOs of technology companies, venture capitalists, and the like. And it's always interesting to think about what is the next technology that is going to have a profound impact on us. And I think that's an interesting set of questions and answers with each of these conversations. But what we really need to do, in addition to having that forward-looking perspective in all that we do, is to set up our organizations to seize opportunities more readily, while also staving off threats to a greater extent as well. And this means really some profound changes to one's organization so that you can pivot quickly to seize these opportunities. If yours is an organization that is multiple decades old, chances are you've got a degree of what we might refer to as technical debt, older technology that perhaps some of your most important data flows through. And it's important to modernize. We're going to hear actually in different ways, multiple of our speakers talk about this modernization process and greater use of cloud technologies, for example. I also wanted to give a quick example from FedEx, which I think is also enlightening. So FedEx was founded by a gentleman named Fred Smith, an iconic leader who still leads in his 70s, leads that organization. Here's a picture of him. And Fred, in the 1960s, went to Yale University and took a course where he was asked to come up, he and his fellow classmates were asked to come up with an idea for a company. And he came up with a vestigial, an early stage, if you will, version of FedEx. And he got a poor mark on his grade. He got a C, which is a very poor mark indeed. I think with the success that that idea has had in the years subsequent, it's probably not the worst thing that's ever happened to him. But one of the things that was particularly progressive about Fred Smith is at the outset, from those early days, he thought to himself that information about the package, that is the packages that are being shipped, are as important as the packages themselves. And this is a really profound insight, that technology, even in the 60s, eventually in the company's founding in the 70s, that information was this important, a foundation for the organization. He also was one of the first to hire a CIO and had him directly report to him, a chief information officer. That person went on to become the COO of that company and then the CEO of multiple other organizations. He was one of the first to hire a board member who was a technologist, something that is now happening with increased rapidity. In fact, Lidia Fonseca is a great example of this as she sits on multiple boards, Robbert Webb as well, organizations who are now requiring technologists to help advise them, both in terms of opportunities but also risk. So Fred, hired about 15 years ago a really outstanding CIO named Rob Carter. And Rob had a really remarkable insight. He had built on this legacy of tremendous technology, and he recognized that as it was becoming more complex, as they built more and more on top of this complex web of technology, that the very source of the company's success would be the source of its downfall. So simplification became the important mantra to follow through on. So he developed more core technologies, as is represented here, more that was common, despite the fact that FedEx, remember, is an airline. It is a trucking company. It is a copying and printing organization, three very, very different businesses. But identifying more that could be done commonly so as to simplify the technology, reduce the complexity, and by the way, de-risk the organization in the process. The less you have to manage, the less of a surface area, to recall back to that slide a moment ago. So, as it says, the technology that led to your success can actually lead to your downfall if you don't go through these important steps. Again, we'll be hearing some examples of this with my fellow panelists here. So, I wanted to conclude by offering 6 insights, 6 steps to prepare for these changes that are coming. Number 1 is document all of the technology in your portfolio. There are still too many large organizations that can't document all of their assets, all of their technology, all their applications. Make sure that you have a means of doing so. One of the good ways of doing so are the practices around enterprise architecture, as an example. Number 2, modernize your technology portfolio. It is important to continue to update it as a means of making sure that it is more scalable, more reliable, less risky, and less complex, as I mentioned a moment ago. Hire for learning agility. This has come up in a variety of different ways. Hire people that are not only have great skills for today, but have the willingness and desire and curiosity to train themselves for the skills for tomorrow. This should really become the way in which you judge the talent that you're bringing in. Fourthly, develop an R&D mentality. So have a portion of your team that is looking around corners, that is attempting to identify the next big thing that might impact your organization. Broaden your ecosystem. Kudos to you for being in a conference like this where you have the opportunity to meet so many other practitioners and gain insights from them. Find more opportunities to broaden your ecosystem for insight. And then lastly, develop agile processes. Find ways as you are developing projects, initiatives, technologies, processes. Do them with the intended audience in mind as a partner to that, so that you're validating that as you're going through the process, so that you are determining the validity and ultimately the value as it's in process. So with that, I'd like to take a seat and turn it over to my friend Dave Smoley at AstraZeneca. So Dave has been the CIO of multiple organizations. He was at Flextronics, which is an OEM organization in California. He's now based in London, where he is the CIO of AstraZeneca, a $23 billion pharmaceutical company. He's a member of the very prestigious CIO magazine CIO Hall of Fame, judged as one of the great people ever to hold this title. And he's going to tell us a little bit about the transformation that he has seen in his 3+ years now at AstraZeneca. Dave, the floor is yours.
Perfect. Thanks, Peter. And I will take the clicker. Very good. So thank you, Peter. Thank you, Senor Fox. Thanks all. What a fantastic day. I have to say it was very special to sit in the room and hear the different perspectives on Latin America and especially Mexico. I will tell you that at AstraZeneca, we are very, very bullish on Mexico from a technology standpoint and from a business standpoint. In fact, 2 years ago, we selected Guadalajara for our global technology center, and we have now more than 300 really top quality talent technologists in Guadalajara that are part of our global footprint. So we're very, very pleased to make that part of our success. And so I'm happy to share with you a little bit about AstraZeneca, which is a $23 billion biopharmaceutical drugs company. We're essentially in the science business. We discover, develop, manufacture, and sell drugs, hopefully drugs that save lives. We're in the oncology, cardiovascular, metabolic, and respiratory therapeutic areas. It's a very, very complex business, heavily regulated, somewhat bureaucratic, and so science is at the heart of it. We invest about $6 billion every year in research and development, and we rely heavily on two things, on technology and on productivity. So I'm pleased to have a few moments to tell you a little bit about our simplification journey. You know, about 4 years ago, we decided that we needed to simplify our IT landscape. And so we went for twice as good for half the cost. This is something that if you're familiar with Lean, Six Sigma, Kaizen, Toyota production method, you know that they simply say double the good and halve the bad. And we applied that mentality to our IT environment. 4 years down the line, we surprisingly managed to achieve that. So we've taken the cash spend that we had at AstraZeneca in technology and IT and literally reduced it by half, and at the same time had significant improvements in our service levels, our customer satisfaction, our performance. The number of severe outages, which is sort of classic IT stuff, was reduced from double digits to single digits. The speed with which we fixed these outages was reduced from days to minutes and hours. And at the same time, we invested heavily in our technology. We went after multiple new cloud technologies like Workday and Salesforce and Viva, DocuSign, Box, Office 365, many of these tools, which are quite common around the world. They're growing and increasing. We hadn't adopted them. We were able to reduce cost, bring in these new technologies, and improve customer satisfaction at the same time. Absolutely key part to our success. And so I wanted to tell you a little bit about how we did that. One of the things Peter Drucker said along the way was culture eats strategy for breakfast. And so we focused a lot on creating a culture that nurtured this massive change, this transformation in the business. And we picked 5 areas to focus on. The first one was customer. Typically in a business and often in a back office function like IT, people don't understand who the customer is, whether in our case it may be a patient or a doctor, but quite often it may be another part of the business, the finance person, a salesperson in the field. So we emphasized and encouraged our individual employees to understand who was their customer, who were they adding value to, and make sure that they thought about that every day. The second thing was operational excellence. Many companies make the mistake of outsourcing their technology to other companies, which is not a bad strategy, but if it's taken too far, if the pendulum swings to an extreme, then it can be a negative. And we had done that. We had gone too far, so we had to retake that. And as big a company as AstraZeneca is, and with 4,000 IT employees, we're bigger than many technology companies. We have the scale to be excellent in technology operations. So we said, look, we're going to be the best at running IT operations, and part of that was insourcing massively. We took work away from a very, very complex, high number of third-party vendors, and we simplified that. We took the handoffs out, and we built internal capability, and that was part of what allowed us to create this technology center in Guadalajara. We brought work from third parties into AstraZeneca. These people they have the heart, they have the mind, as we heard earlier, to be successful. The third thing was technology leadership. Increasingly technology, as we saw today multiple times from Peter and from Tom Friedman and everyone, the pace of change is just out of control. So you can't rely on other people to advise you on this, or let's put it, to make the decisions, right? You need lots of advisors, but you need to make the decisions yourself. You need to be familiar with these new technologies so that you can decide how to apply them into your business to get that competitive advantage. So we decided to invest in technology leadership. And then finally, simplifying this complex IT function as well as this complex organization and working to increase collaboration. We've invested heavily in virtual collaboration, telepresence, Skype, all these capabilities that allow people to work from wherever they are in the world. I was on a meeting today in my hacienda cabin today. It was fantastic. Able to connect from León, Mexico with Sweden, UK, North America, and China. Very, very effective. So this is all about running IT brilliantly. So as we look to the future and pushing the boundaries, how can we bring in this innovation? How can we push to create competitive advantage? We've got these 3 focus areas that are part of our strategy. The first one is where 90% of the resources go. All the, significant lion's share of people, significant lion's share of dollar goes to just running the IT, the data centers, the network. The question and the opportunity for the future is how to shift that percentage, shift some of those resources from running, which is sort of like a utility, like the electricity, into the innovation and the digitization. So that's what we're focusing on now, is how to be more and more increasingly efficient on the run piece, and hopefully shift those resources into simplifying clinical operations, clinical processes, manufacturing operations, our field sales force, and so on, and then looking at those opportunities where we can pilot innovations, pilot new technologies, and bring them in to create competitive advantage. So in conclusion, what we're doing is taking from an environment where stability was a question, reliability was a question, we didn't have the trust of the business. I thought it was a great quote from Thomas Friedman today when he said, trust is the ultimate performance enhancing drug. I wrote that down and tweeted. I thought that was fantastic. We didn't have the trust. Hopefully you have the trust of your customers and your business, but we didn't have that 4 years ago, so we had to work hard to earn that trust. We're now somewhere in the middle here, this trusted operator and business partner, and we're shooting for that top part where it really becomes a competitive advantage. And so I think the point is, as you do this, you have to always keep your eye on the ball of running things, yet thinking about innovation. You have to do them both. You can't just pick one or the other. Thank you very much. So, Peter?
Dave, thank you so much. I think it's so interesting. I wrote a piece on Dave in January, and I titled it, IT at double the value at half the cost. And it was one of the most read pieces I've ever written for Forbes. And I think this is just, as so many organizations have outsourced tremendous aspects of what they do, they've done so with a machete, not with a scalpel. And I think it's really interesting to see the way in which, ironically, a lot of the justification for doing that at the beginning was cost. And what you've proven, Dave, is that's part of several things, but insourcing actually had cost advantages as well. So ironically, the reverse step has actually led to tremendous advantage. And this sort of simplification process that now is propelling the organization forward from an innovation perspective. A fantastic story. Thank you again. Let's turn to Rob Webb. What's so interesting is Dave found himself at a very mature organization that had outsourced tremendously. So much, in fact, that they needed to bring back a lot more. Rob, by contrast, joined the fastest growing airline on earth, Etihad Airways, based in Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates. Rob was the CIO at Hilton, had been a CIO of multiple organizations prior to that as well. He is on the board of CITA. He is somebody who has been sought after by multiple venture capital firms as at the center of a broad ecosystem that he has that includes CIOs, includes a variety of other practitioners. And what is so extraordinary is the way in which he has taken this enormous growth, this juggernaut of an airline of his, and put in really sound practices to make sure that it is a more sustainable growth in the process. So with that, Rob?
Good afternoon, and thank you everyone for the hospitality here in Lyon. It's just been a fantastic experience so far. I want to tell you a little bit about Etihad Aviation Group. I'm not sure if you got the slides up there, but Etihad Aviation Group is one of the fastest growing airlines in the world, but we're not just a single airline. We're actually an airline holding company that also has investments in other airlines around the world. We're investors in Alitalia, we're investors in Air Berlin, and Air Seychelles, Air Serbia, and we have a loyalty company and a ground handling company. And I arrived at the airline about 3.5 years ago, and everything in the airline had been insourced. So the company had really technology that was far behind where it needed to be in the organization. And we set out a really systematic way to build capabilities in the airline, and it's called the Etihad 2020 flight plan. And I'll describe it to you. I don't need the slides, but the flight plan is really a series of 20 programs and 5 enabling capabilities that we implemented across the airline. And it really starts with people capabilities of program management, financial management, application security and architecture, and then 4 layers of activity, one being the infrastructure and operations, so the data center activities. I'll just forward to the piece that we're talking about. So the underlying enabling capabilities, which I described, the infrastructure, operations, and security, which is all of the things you need to do to make certain that the information systems operate flawlessly, because in an airline, it's a very, very challenging business. We're affected by many external forces, weather, labor unions in some cases, fuel prices, and information systems need to work flawlessly because our consumers, our guests on the airline are dependent on those working when they're booking or when they're checking in, as well as the pilots in the aircraft. So we wanted the infrastructure to run flawlessly. We also needed to upgrade and replace the back office systems for the company. So like Dave, we embraced the cloud and implemented 9 modules of SAP across all of the airlines to simplify to common platforms. And then the secret sauce in the airline industry is something number 5 in that chart, which is revenue optimization. And that's really what you charge a person for their seat on the aircraft. And increasingly, that's moving towards a market of one. So highly precise targeting to really offer the right price and availability for that flight for the individual, and understanding the person's elasticity to pay more and their long-term loyalty for the company. So we invested heavily in building the AI and analytics capability to optimize revenue management in the company. And then the things that we see every day, we reinvested in, and that's the online experience, the mobile experience, so you can do check-in on board. And we've got fantastic aircraft. We've got the new A380 from Airbus and the Boeing 787. We've got superb service on board the aircraft, but the technology infrastructure really wasn't matching that service proposition, so we invested heavily in digital guest innovation. So these are some of our drivers of value. We think it's really important to know our guests without being intrusive, to know your preferences, your buying patterns when you board the aircraft. We're a national airline, so we want people to experience the United Arab Emirates and Abu Dhabi. And also, we want to smooth any disruption. So when things happen in your travel experience, we want to be able to notify people proactively because sometimes communication really just can solve a lot of the issues if people just know that there's been a weather delay or their bags delayed. And then we really wanted to make sure that we had the basics of the airline simplified so that we could empower the digital interactions with our consumers. As you know, many guests now book online. People check prices online. So if the website capabilities or the mobile capabilities are not up to par, they're not as good as your experience with Uber or your bank, then you're likely to, in the long term, travel with somebody else. And then, so this is really what we've done. We've got in our A380, we've got butlers on board and in-flight nannies for people who are traveling with children. And we have expanded to redevelop our mobile application. It was our best return program in the last year. We invested a couple of $1 million, paid back over $40 million in revenues. We now have alerting capabilities on on things like the Apple Watch and on the iPad. So we've really started to reimagine the entire guest experience. And then I'll end on a note that we think that innovation and strategic thinking, really getting the best ideas from all of our employees and our partners is critical. So we entered into a series of partnerships, and these partnerships are with some of the world's largest companies. So we worked with IBM on the infrastructure to really build world-class data centers in Italy and Abu Dhabi, have them geographically redundant so that if there are issues, we fall over to alternate data centers. We've digitized the core airline, getting all of the airlines on a common reservation system and implementing SAP. And then we've used Adobe to help us to redevelop the entire front end of the airline. And that's helping us to achieve our mission. And our mission is to serve our guests, to secure the infrastructure, to share technologies across the ecosystem of airlines that we're part of, and then to build a better future for Abu Dhabi. So that's an overview, and thank you very much.
Rob, thank you so much. I think it's so interesting that Etihad is an airline that has won many awards for what we all traditionally think about an airline experience to be. Great flights, great planes, tremendous service that you can't believe, frankly. One of the earlier speakers talked about how all airline service is the same. I thought I was gonna have to hold Rob back on that one. But what I think is so interesting about Rob's story is how so much of that magical customer experience is now replicated in the digital realm, and finding ways to use technology creatively to enhance the experience from booking through check-in, through the flight itself, and even after the flight, to make sure that all the while the organization is taking care of its customers. Thank you so much for sharing those insights, Rob. So Lidia Fonseca is next. Lidia is really an extraordinary IT leader. She has been at Quest Diagnostics for about 3 years or so now. She is on the board of multiple organizations, public companies, and she actually is the most recent winner of the Forbes CIO Innovation Award that is given out to chief information officers who develop revenue-centric innovation. Still quite a, not necessarily the most common thing for CIOs to do. So with that, please welcome Lidia.
Hello. Nayarit, exacto. Viva Nayarit. Es donde nací yo. Good afternoon, everybody. Let me tell you a little bit about Quest. Let me make sure this works. All right. So imagine the year is 2013. And in 2013, we talked a lot today about the subject of reinventing yourself. Right? Reinventing yourself as a company, as a leader, your personal brand. So imagine the year 2013, Quest Diagnostics was actually losing revenue to the tune of 4%. Our stock price was at $54. So we had to really reinvent ourselves. So we started by looking at what does Quest bring to the healthcare ecosystem? And we serve 50% of all hospitals do business with us, or we do business with them. We're connected 470,000 doctors in the US, did electronically, digitally, to all of our services and everything that we do. We are connected with more than 600 electronic medical records across all of the US and Canada and other parts. And we have access as a company through our relationships with the insurance companies to 80% of all the lives in the US. We serve 1/3 of Americans every year, but 100 million people get tested by us every year. And it's 50% every 2-3 years. And through our JV with Quintiles, we develop actually 50% of all of the FDA-approved oncology precision medicine capabilities since 2014. So when you have those kind of assets, you can imagine that we as a leadership team thought we can make something happen with these assets. And so the other thing that we are very focused on If you think about it, 20 years ago, it was the health, the insurance company was at the center of the healthcare ecosystem. 10 years ago, the provider was at the center of the healthcare ecosystem. We very much believe that the consumer is the next force, audience, that's really going to drive a lot of the innovation and what happens in healthcare. So one of the things that we've been doing is expanding our retail presence. So we have a partnership with Safeway. We're now managing clinics at the Safeway stores. We've already set up 100, and we're on path to do another 100 over the next 6 months. We just announced a partnership with Walmart. We're going to be managing their clinics at the Walmarts. We have a relationship with CVS, where we do all of the testing for the CVS clinics. And we also won an award from Ancestry.com, and we are their provider for phenotype testing. And we're doing a number of other really cool things on the consumer side. So we definitely see the consumer as a powerful force in our future. So when you think, we looked at it, we said, how are we going to grow the company? And we said, okay, part of the growth is going to come the way it's always come from. It'll come from acquisitions. There's still enough possibilities out there. We can continue to consolidate the market. 1 to 2% of our growth will come from acquisitions. Then we said, but we believe healthcare is a team sport. So we're going to partner with insurance companies, with hospitals and integrated delivery networks, and with other entities that are risk-bearing, and we're going to partner with them to grow our business. We're also going to offer the broadest access to diagnostic innovation. So we created a whole unit earlier this year called Advanced Diagnostics. That's a $1 billion business today, and it's molecular, it's genetics, it's advanced testing like non-invasive prenatal testing, neurology, Alzheimer's, some of these rare conditions. And so we're going to offer the broadest innovation so that we continue to expand our diagnostic testing. We're going to be recognized as the consumer-friendly partner of choice. And number 5, we're going to support population health through really leveraging analytics and really put information in the hands of those providers so that they can make better decisions about how to treat their patients and have better outcomes. Now, interestingly enough, if I had stood here on this stage with you 3 years ago, those 4, the only one that you would have seen in our strategy was growing, through acquisition. So we really are reinventing ourselves, and so the 4 out of these 5 strategies are actually the ones that we've deployed over the last 2-3 years. Our stock price today is more than $100. Okay, 4 years, it went up from 54 to 100 plus. So we are creating value for the company, and more importantly, for our customers. And the decision that we made is that we are going to be more than a lab. We are going to be a partner of choice. So one of the things that we did about 1.5 years ago is that we actually created and launched an entire technology and data portfolio, a brand, and it's called Quest Quantum. And through our Quest Quantum brand, we're actually delivering technology and data solutions into the market that are generating revenue, that are growing our business, and that are really making a difference, to the industry. From our belief, what's happening in healthcare is that we're moving away from treating the sick to keeping people well. That transformation means that data and being able to connect the dots about a patient will make a difference in how we treat that patient, and more importantly, better outcomes for them, in quality of life. So I talked about Quest Quantum. All of these services that you see here are services that we have launched over the last 3 years. And just to give you an example, MyQuest is a patient portal. We launched that in 2014. We now have 5 million consumers that interact with us and order their testing and access our services through the MyQuest patient portal. And so we continue to really innovate, and we have a lot of analytics solutions that we've launched into the market. So let me give you an example about what I mean about what we're providing. So one of the services that we provide is called a Blueprint for Wellness. And in this Blueprint for Wellness, we actually provide to a consumer. They get testing, but they get a report, a pretty comprehensive digital or paper report, depending on how they want to see it, and it actually shows them how they're doing across a comprehensive set of testing. And their health is, you can see their cholesterol, diabetes, weight, preventive screenings, blood pressure, all these different combination of medical or clinical, but also lifestyle, also choices that they make, and they get a score. And obviously the green areas, we say, hey, those you're doing great, keep up the good work, keep doing what you're doing. If they have red items, they actually get from us steps about what to do to manage that risk and reduce that risk. So we're really putting, tools and services in their hands so they can make, the right decisions and actually drive down the risk so they can have a better quality of life. And healthcare costs also go down, right? So let me give you a little bit of a view when you think about what services we're talking about. I'm going to show you a consumer journey, and this is Amy. And Amy, like many Americans, is taking care of, she has children that she looks after, and she has a dependent parent that she looks after. So we're going to show you the kind of experience that Amy has with Quest Diagnostics.
While waiting to pick up her kids, Amy gets a phone call from her mom, Ruth, who needs to visit the doctor for some routine tests. Amy opens myquest.com on her phone and reviews her family account. Amy navigates to the Schedule an Appointment page and finds her mother's home address is already pre-populated. All that's left is to select a phlebotomist. And just like that, the appointment is made. Amy reviews the details before calling her mom back to let her know that everything's scheduled. Ruth is relieved. A couple of days before Ruth's appointment, Amy receives a digital reminder. Quest is connected across all devices, so staying in touch is easy, and Amy can stay on top of everything she needs to know. She even receives a notification when the phlebotomist arrives. After the appointment, Ruth calls Amy. She was so grateful for the at-home visit. A few days later, Ruth's results are in. Amy logs into MyQuest to take a look. Good news! Ruth's results are better than expected. Amy returns to her homepage and notices a recommended article for her son, Jack. Jack was recently diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, and the family is still trying to learn more about it. The recommended article is about MODY, a genetic test that identifies a type of diabetes that doesn't require insulin shots. Amy is curious and wonders if MODY testing would be right for Jack. She schedules a video call with a genetic counselor to learn more. Before the call, she's able to share Jack's most recent test results, and the user-friendly experience makes the meeting quick and easy. The counselor believes Jack could be a great candidate for genetic testing and shares some helpful information for Amy to read before Jack's next appointment.
So, just closing comments for you. We believe that healthcare is no longer just happening at hospitals or at the doctor's office. It's mobile. It can happen at the workplace. We can come and do a screening for employees. It can happen in your home. We now have kits that we can send home, and you can do the testing yourself, like what we're doing with Ancestry and others. And, I can tell you that our belief is, from data becomes insight. Insight turns into action, action that changes lives. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lidia. What a fascinating story that really brings to life the value and the changing customer experience that can happen through technology. I hear a few different themes that have come through each of these examples. One which certainly came clear through Dave and through Rob was the notion of simplification and a cloud-first portfolio of technology, emphasizing that. We hear from all of them, even though very different customers in each case, that keeping the customer in mind and understanding how he or she uses technology today and fitting into that in a greater way becomes so much more important. We also hear about choosing your partners more wisely. We hear about the partners in each of these cases. Today, competition is less company to company and more ecosystem to ecosystem. And so choosing your ecosystem appropriately such that you can go forward together in a much more sustainable path becomes that much more important. But we are all that stand between you and some drinks and some food. So with that, perhaps we should close this out. Would you please join me in thanking Dave, Rob, and Lidia?
Hey, Peter, please. I'm going to make use of my privilege again of being the patron aquí. And I want you to get thirsty because we are going to have a spectacular surprise party right after we finish here. So get ready for that. We're not going to get drunk. We're going to get happy and enjoy life. But I cannot let you go, Peter, without one question and one comment. The question is, I would like to have a very brief outlook of Medicare, Obamacare, or Trumpcare. Where is the truth? And number two, this is fantastic. ¿Cómo te llamas tu changarro? Quest? Okay. Request to Quest and to you, Peter. I'm committing, and I tried this once before and I failed. I commit to convince authorities in Mexico that provide 80% of all health care in Mexico. The rest is private. The public health service system needs urgently to move to this kind of technology. So I'm committed to bring you there and convince them that this must be done in Mexico. We have now through the summatory of Seguro Social, el otro, ¿cómo se llama el público? El IMSS, el IMSS, ISSSTE, and Seguro Popular. Mexico is very close to full 100% coverage. So every single family in Mexico, no matter that is the poorest of the poor, do have the service. The problem is the quality of the service, and the problem is the delivery of the service, which is awful. So I think by joining this strategic venture, we can improve quickly the system up to standards that are non-existent in Mexico. So please, brief answer or comment, whoever of you want to. Obamacare, Medicare, Trumpcare, Fuchi Trumpcare.
Would you like to?
I'd like to discuss about
President Fox, thank you so much, and thank you for ending it on a very not so controversial point. What did Tom Friedman say? Next question in the back, please. Well, I think, I live in Washington. I must admit that I don't work with the government, and healthcare is not necessarily my area of expertise. I think what we're seeing is, yet again, a situation where Trump has a lot of talk, but not necessarily the ability to back that up. We see that with the number of times now that he has attempted to replace Obamacare unsuccessfully, and we now see a greater number of Republicans who would like to do something to amend Obamacare, not to repeal and replace. And so it seems as though, and I'm no expert and certainly no pontificator, but I believe that it looks like the solution now is likely to continue with what works well with Obamacare and continuing to amend it. But I would defer to my colleagues on stage, especially those who have healthcare experience, with anything they care to comment on.
So, so our perspective is that, you know, I think the Republicans were a bit quick to judge that Obamacare, you know, didn't have elements that worked in it. I think now that they step back from it, they realize that there are some parts of it that do work, and there are some parts that need work. And I think that where things are moving is really where it should have been to begin with, where you have both Republicans and Democrats working together, and saying, okay, these parts are good, let's focus on the areas that we can improve. And I think, you know, now that they've seen that it wasn't, you know, that it's not palatable the way it was, I do think that they are starting to have that collaboration to move that forward. I think from the private sector, you know, there's been a lot of contribution towards the conversation, but I do think it takes really the different groups working together to really come up with something that actually takes it forward and improves it. On your comment about, you know, providing some of these services here in Mexico in terms of the delivery, I can tell you that, you know, President Fox said that he has tried it and, you know, hasn't worked. I can tell you that we also tried it with a partner that we were considering to actually create a joint venture here in Mexico. And that one didn't work, but we are very open to that conversation because we do believe that there's a great opportunity. And, you know, given the infrastructure and what we have in place, we feel that we could actually help with that. So very interested in that conversation, and we certainly would be open to exploring it.
Rob, I think there was something you wanted to say as well.
Just a very brief comment. As a Canadian, I can tell you that nationalized medicine provides high quality of care at many times at lower cost, you know, because the administrative and insurance costs associated with private health care are very, very high. And I think Mexico has a huge opportunity because there's zero marginal cost associated with software. And if you think of software like the software Lidia and Dave are developing, that software drives both productivity and innovation that can be, you know, customer-centric or client-patient-centric, and Mexico has a great opportunity to do that.
Great insights. Thank you, Rob. With that, I think we'll close it out. President Fox, thank you so much for your comments. Thank you again to you and to Mrs. Marta for including us. It's been a wonderful experience so far, and thank you all.